Hey guys, tonight we begin in the sand, not the postcard kind, but the dry, clingy stuff that finds its way into your robes, your sandals, and yes, even between your toes. You're standing just outside the great city of Memphis, not the one with guitars and blue suede shoes, but the beating heart of ancient Egypt around 1400 BCE. The sun hasn't quite risen yet, but the air already smells like warmed limestone, distant fig trees, and someone's overused incense burner. You're not here for glory. You're not building pyramids or studying astronomy in the temples. No, you've recently been assigned a job that most scribes don't even put in writing, one that palace gossips whisper about with a stifled laugh. You are now the severer of the sacred nail, more commonly known as the royal toenail keeper. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake in your part of the world, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing the sleepy map light up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your shift begins just before dawn, when the palace is mostly silent, except for the predictable snoring of that one court scribe who never makes it to roll call. You trudge past limestone columns and guards too tired to inspect you properly. The path to the bathing chamber is paved with sandstone tiles, each slightly uneven, worn by centuries of royal feet. This morning, the pharaoh is preparing for a temple procession. That means ceremonial grooming from head to toe, literally. You, lucky you, are in charge of the toe part. As you push open the bronze inlaid door to the preparation hall, the smell hits you first. Spiced myrrh, beeswax polish, and the distinct tang of sweaty linen wraps. There's a low murmur of activity. Servants brushing wigs, adjusting gold collars, oiling statues. You hang back for a moment, then shuffle toward your corner station, a low stool beside a basin of lotus-scented water. Historians still argue whether roles like yours were official priesthoods, a kind of foot-worshipping clergy, or simply the bottom rung on the palace employment ladder. Either way, the job exists, and today it's yours. You try not to make eye contact with the royal masseuse, who smirks knowingly as she passes. Everyone knows what you do. A royal steward approaches with a folded towel and a grimace. "You're new," he says without waiting for a reply. "Don't nick the skin, or the God King's mood will nick your head." You nod, gulp, and place your kit beside you, a wooden box lacquered in blue and gold. Inside, gold-plated nail clippers, slightly dulled, a curved ivory file, a sliver of pumice stone, and a small jar of goose fat and crushed peppermint for post-trim anointing. Foot grooming in ancient Egypt wasn't just about hygiene. It was ritual. It was power. And occasionally, it was politics. Priests were shaved, heads to heels. Royal feet, meanwhile, were anointed, perfumed, and symbolically cleansed of the burdens of ruling. A well-trimmed big toe might not win battles, but it could certainly win respect. You kneel as the pharaoh enters, not in robes, but in a loose linen kilt, barefoot and humming. He is younger than you expected, with sharp eyes and a surprisingly well-moisturized heel. You try not to stare. You bow low. As he takes his seat and rests one foot on a cushioned stool, you wait for the nod. It comes. You begin with a ritual rinse, pouring warm lotus water over his foot, patting it dry with a soft linen cloth. Then you examine the royal toenails. Surprisingly neat. Not too thick, not too yellow. There is, however, one slightly jagged edge on the left pinky toe, a tiny offense against divine symmetry. You clip it carefully, catching the crescent of keratin in a tiny alabaster dish. This isn't trash, not at all. These clippings, once removed, will be sealed in a clay jar and burned with sacred herbs. In some temples, they are stored in small amulets as part of fertility rites. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, symbolism, or some weird combination of both. Behind you, a priest begins to chant. Not about toenails, thankfully. Something about Ra's chariot. You work quickly but carefully, shaping each nail with the ivory file until it's smooth even, and frankly nicer than most people's teeth. The pharaoh shifts. "You're gentler than the last one," he murmurs. He filed with the enthusiasm of a war chariot. You suppress a smile. "Thank you, your divine sandal." He laughs. It's not every day the toenail keeper makes a joke. You file the last toe and apply a dab of goose fat and mint. The foot gleams. As you rise, careful not to show your back to the king, the steward leans in. "Survived your first morning. He didn't kick you. That's a good sign." You bow once more and carry your tray of clippings toward the incineration pit behind the temple. As you walk, the rising sun warms your face. The scent of lotus and mint clings to your fingers. No one dreams of being a royal toenail servant, but today in the palace, your work matters. And in Egypt, that's almost better than being remembered. You wake up sore from kneeling. Even though the bedding in the servants' quarters is little more than straw covered with a woven mat, it's better than the cold marble floor of the grooming chamber. You stretch, already dreading the ache behind your knees, and pull on your linen tunic. You're going to need more goose fat for your own joints if this job keeps up. As you shuffle toward the palace again, the city is beginning to stir. Chickens cluck behind mud brick homes, and the scent of barley porridge seeps from open windows. Somewhere in the distance, someone's playing a reed flute just slightly off key. And in the palace, the royal feet are probably already being dipped in perfumed water. You're not late, but you're not early either. You move quickly past the stone lions flanking the main entrance. You nod to the guards, who smirk again. Word of your new post has clearly spread faster than the Nile in flood season. When you first heard about the opening in the palace grooming court, you thought it might mean hair, maybe light massage, something dignified. But as the priest assigned to labor placement read your lot aloud and chuckled softly, you knew fate had other plans. "You'll serve the body," he said, "specifically the toes." And then he moved on to the next name, as if yours had just been wrapped in linen and buried. Nobody asks to become a royal toenail keeper. It's a role reserved for the particularly unlucky or the particularly obedient. One you can't easily decline, because when the state religion considers the pharaoh a living god, refusing to tend his divine cuticles is the bureaucratic equivalent of blasphemy. Still, it's not the worst job in Egypt. That honor might go to the dung haulers of Thebes or the tomb painters who occasionally get sealed in with their work. Accidentally or not, you at least get to work in the shade. This morning, the air in the grooming court is already thick with activity. The pharaoh's schedule today includes 3 offerings, 2 audiences, and a feast, which means grooming must be flawless, and flawless grooming includes pristine feet. The grooming steward greets you with a short nod. Clip clean, file flat, no divots. He hands you a fresh cloth and a flask of date wine, not for drinking, but to disinfect the nail clippers. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. The last toenail keeper left one ragged edge, cursed 3 harvests. Or so the priests say. You know better than to argue. The ancient Egyptians took grooming seriously. Cleanliness was next to godliness, literally. Even the Book of the Dead mentions being purified before entering the field of reeds. And in that afterlife paradise, your toenails, perfect. The pharaoh enters moments later, flanked by musicians softly strumming lutes. He is already perfumed, his chest glistening with oil. His mood seems lighter today. He's humming something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. You kneel again as he rests one foot on the stool. The toe ring on his second toe catches the morning light. It's shaped like a falcon clutching a sun disk. Pure gold. Probably weighs more than your yearly rations. You begin the ritual. Wash, dry, inspect. One toe has a faint bruise, nothing alarming. Probably from the ceremonial sandals. Those things are decorative nightmares. Woven gold wire may look good on temple murals, but it's murder on the pinky toe. As you trim and file, your mind drifts. You imagine the old pharaohs of legend, Tutankhamun, Amenhotep, and that one who insisted on being drawn like a beanpole. Did they all have toenail keepers? Probably. Someone had to do it. Historians still argue whether this kind of grooming was reserved for religious rituals or performed daily. The palace records are annoyingly vague. A few scrolls from the House of Life mention clippers of the sacred body, but whether that meant toes or something else entirely remains unclear. The pharaoh clears his throat. You refocus and notice the slightest bit of dead skin near his heel. You hesitate. Technically, callus removal is outside your official duties, but ignoring it would make the toes look unbalanced. And you're a professional now. So gently, you take a sliver of pumice and begin to smooth the heel. The pharaoh sighs, contentedly. That's the spot, he mutters. You suppress a grin. You might be trimming royal feet, but in this moment you are also soothing a god. A very ticklish, slightly pampered god. But still, you finish with a dab of mint balm and a quick dusting of powdered amber resin. The scent is warm and faintly spicy, like ancient incense and distant campfires. You know the pharaoh will leave the chamber with feet so perfectly groomed that priests will chant his praises in the temple court, and the pigeons might too. You stand, nod, and back away. The steward checks your work with a critical eye, then gives a reluctant grunt of approval. It's the closest thing to a compliment you'll get this week. As you carry the day's clippings to the temple fire, you notice something odd. A cluster of servants is gathered around a young boy who's just dropped his tray of fig cakes. They're all laughing, but not kindly. You overhear someone say, "At least he's not on toe duty." You keep walking. Your feet ache, your knees complain. But as the sacred smoke rises from the jar of nail clippings curling up like an offering to the gods, you realize something strange. You're starting to care. It's a terrible, specific kind of pride, but it's pride nonetheless. You don't exactly dream about toenails anymore. Not every night, but sometimes. In that hazy middle space between sleep and waking, you swear you hear clippers snipping and smell mint balm. It's unsettling, not terrifying, just unsettling. Like realizing you've started humming temple hymns while scrubbing your own feet in the river. This morning, you're summoned earlier than usual. The messenger is breathless, wide-eyed, and far too enthusiastic for this hour. Emergency trimming, he whispers like it's a matter of state security. Inspection from the Nubian envoy. The pharaoh wants to look. He searches for a word. Divine. You drag yourself up, splash water on your face, and grab your grooming kit. You try to convince yourself this is just another Tuesday, not the most high-pressure pedicure in Egyptian history. Historians still argue whether envoys and foreign visitors were actually shown the pharaoh's bare feet, or if this kind of grooming was symbolic, like polishing a sacred statue even if no one sees it. But either way, appearances matter. Every inch of the royal form is considered semi-divine, and you, humble clipper, are now in charge of its bottommost extremities. The palace is already buzzing when you arrive. Musicians rehearse stately melodies just outside the Hall of Pillars. Servants rush by with trays of fruit, bundles of peacock feathers, and a disturbingly large jar of honey. You don't ask. In the grooming chamber, the steward doesn't greet you with his usual grunt. Instead, he whispers, "You've got 12 minutes. You blink. For both feet? Do you want to be the reason Egypt loses trade rights for ebony and ostrich eggs? You get to work." The pharaoh enters, his expression unusually focused. His ceremonial headdress is already secured, and his face glows with oil and crushed lapis. He gives you a tight nod and lifts his foot without a word. The left big toe has a small crack, not dangerous, but visible. You wince. Of course it had to be that toe. You gently begin cleaning around it with warm water and soft linen. The clipper hovers nearby, but you know not to rush. Toenails, unlike diplomacy, do not respond well to pressure. "I once stepped on a scorpion," the pharaoh says suddenly. "Did I ever tell you that?" You glance up startled. "No, your radiance." "Ruined a festival, limped through half the ceremony. The priest said it was a bad omen. Mother said it was just bad luck." You nod solemnly, trimming the edge of the cracked nail with precision. And now I wear sandals made of ivory. No more scorpions." He chuckles softly, and the tension eases. There's a quiet truth here. In this chamber, with only the whisper of your file and the occasional grunt from the steward, The pharaoh is just a man with tired feet and too many ceremonies. You wonder if other keepers ever noticed that. You apply a thin layer of balm to the crack and begin filing the nail's edge smooth. The skin around it is slightly inflamed but not infected. You mutter a quiet blessing under your breath. Not because it's required, but because, well, it feels right. The pharaoh exhales deeply. You have a careful hand. Better than a careful sword, you reply, surprising yourself. He snorts, especially near toes. You finish the left foot in 7 minutes. The right foot is in better shape. Just a bit of dirt under one nail and a tiny scratch on the heel. You're grateful. You won't have to file it raw like you did last week after the sandal rubbing incident. You apply finishing powder and flick a feather brush over the tops of his feet. Standard ritual gesture. A priest enters to check the anointing sequence. He nods at your work but doesn't speak to you directly. You're still too low in the hierarchy for holy conversation. As the pharaoh stands, he tests his weight on both feet. No wince, no shift in balance. You let out a quiet breath of victory. The steward claps once. Clear the chamber. You pack your kit quickly and quietly. Outside, the sun is blinding, and a line of dancers is practicing in the courtyard. You spot the Nubian envoy's retinue just arriving, resplendent in gold-studded leather, their faces painted with careful lines of ochre and ash. You're tempted to linger to see how the inspection goes, but protocol says otherwise. Groomers don't mingle with diplomats. Groomers, you've come to learn, don't mingle with anyone. Still, as you head toward the temple fire with your sealed nail clippings jar, a young page falls into step beside you. He's new, judging by the way he keeps tripping on his own sandals. Did you fix the crack? He asks, eyes wide. Yes. Do you think the envoy will notice? No, but the pharaoh will. The boy nods thoughtfully. Then, without warning, he blurts, I want your job one day. You nearly trip. You what? You get to touch royalty, he says earnestly. You get to make the pharaoh feel better. You blink at him. There's a part of you that wants to laugh. Another part that's strangely moved. Maybe you've forgotten what the job looks like from the outside. You reach the sacred flame and carefully place the clippings jar into the fire pit. The resin-sealed lid lets out a soft hiss. Smoke curls upward, joining the other offerings already rising. Burnt bread, dried lotus, a crushed beetle or two. You wonder if the gods know what's in your jar. You wonder if they care. As you walk back through the temple gardens, you let your fingers trail through the fronds of a papyrus bush. The day is warming quickly. A breeze carries the scent of tamarisk and distant roasting onions. Your knees ache, your back twinges, but your work today may have smoothed an international negotiation, one pinky toe at a time. There are worse legacies. By now, you've established a rhythm. You wake before the first ibis screeches from the riverside, splash the Nile's chill against your face, and rub your joints with warmed oil, generously, if you're honest, because crouching at the divine heels of a god king is murder on the lumbar. You've also started noticing things you didn't before, like how the palace stone stays cool until just after sunrise, or how the pharaoh's left pinky toe curves slightly inward, as if it harbors some ancient royal secret you wouldn't dare ask. But today, you're not summoned to the usual grooming chamber. Instead, a scribe appears just as you're stretching your calves beside the laundry baskets. You're needed in the river pavilion, he says, ceremonial bathing. You pause mid-stretch. I'm not trained in holy ablutions. The scribe shrugs. Feet only. You follow him through a series of courtyards, past walls, painted with geese, fish, and boats that never seem to move. The river pavilion is half open to the elements, its pillars carved with lotus blossoms and waterfowl. The breeze off the Nile carries a hint of silt and something sharper. Fish? Reeds? You're not sure. The pharaoh is already there, lounging on a low stool while priests chant from scrolls in low tones. He wears only a ceremonial kilt and a necklace of carved turquoise beads. Beside him sits a silver basin filled with water, so clear it reflects the sky. You bow. The pharaoh gestures to the basin. Cleanse the burden of the earth, he murmurs, quoting an old hymn. You step forward and kneel, your linen robe rustling. The water is cool but not cold, scented faintly with papyrus and something bitter. Lotus root, perhaps. You dip a cloth and begin to wash. This isn't your usual foot scrubbing routine. It's deliberate, symbolic. Every swipe of the cloth is meant to remove not just dust, but the weight of sin, labor, and memory. At least that's what the temple manuals say. You're not entirely sure toenails store memory, but who are you to argue? You recall an obscure scroll you once saw in the palace archive, written in faded Demotic script. It described how the earliest kings of Upper Egypt would bathe in the Nile under moonlight, believing it purified not just the body, but the dynasty's fate. Historians still argue whether these accounts are literal or metaphorical, or possibly just state-funded poetry. You gently lift the pharaoh's heel, inspecting the pad. No blisters. You'd secretly worried about that after last week's ceremonial dance where he wore those stiff crocodile leather sandals. It's a small victory. You file the nails slowly, careful to avoid snags. The edges curve like crescent moons. You've gotten good at this, too good maybe. You can tell how hydrated a royal diet is just by the color of the keratin. This week's been fig heavy. You can smell it. The pharaoh speaks again, half to himself. In Nubia, their kings paint their feet red before battle. You nod. For courage? For terror. The enemies think their toes are dipped in blood. You smile faintly. We have mint balm. The pharaoh grins, just a flicker of teeth. Effective in its own way. After the washing, a priest steps forward with an alabaster jar. You're handed a goose feather brush and asked to apply the oil of stillness across the tops of both feet. You work slowly, letting each stroke glide like a soft breeze across temple stone. The oil is thick and golden, and it smells like a funeral procession, but in a good way. A hush falls. Even the priests stop chanting. You look up. The pharaoh has closed his eyes. His chest rises and falls in a slow, rhythmic pattern. You've put the god to sleep. You freeze. Is that bad? Are you supposed to nudge him, wake him, offer more balm? No one moves. After several breaths, the steward clears his throat and gestures for you to withdraw. Carefully, reverently, you place the cloth into the basin, bow once, and back away from the stool. A servant pulls a reed screen across the open side of the pavilion, dimming the light. Outside, the world resumes. You find a bench near the papyrus pond and sit, arms limp at your sides. The frogs are croaking again. Somewhere, a water wheel groans into motion. You close your eyes. You can still feel the texture of the pharaoh's heel beneath your fingers. A young servant carrying scrolls passes by and snorts. Fell asleep during his own blessing? Feeble do that to a man, you reply, too tired to care whether it sounded ridiculous. Later in the staff quarters, someone leaves a small offering by your cot. A date cake wrapped in fig leaf. No note. But you know what it means. You, the royal toenail keeper, soothed a god into slumber. The priest may call it a ceremonial washing. The palace may log it as foot maintenance. But in that moment, you performed a small miracle. Not bad for a person with a job no one wants. Your name isn't written anywhere official. Not on the palace scrolls, not on the linen manifest, not even in the stable duty rosters, where somehow even the guy who collects horse sweat gets a mention. But lately, people have started nodding to you in the hallways. Not bowing, not greeting, just a subtle, shared look. A toe-dipped hint of recognition. And today you're invited, ordered, to the scribal quarter. This has never happened before. The scribal quarter smells like ink, goat hide parchment, and powdered myrrh. You trail behind the courier, ducking under low archways and weaving between baskets of reeds. Scribes blink at you from behind wax tablets, their fingers stained black-blue from writing the laws that you'll never get to break. Room 3, the courier says, don't knock. You don't. Inside, it's quieter than a tomb at noon. One lone scribe sits on a mat surrounded by scrolls. He's ancient in the way a date pit is, small, wrinkled, indestructible. He gestures for you to sit. Tell me, he rasps, not looking up. How long does it take to trim the pharaoh's smallest toe? You blink. Right or left? He snorts, amused apparently. Correct answer. What follows is a bizarre interview. The scribe asks questions like, have you ever nicked the cuticle of a god? And would you be able to match sandal calluses to regional soil types? You answer with as much dignity as you can muster, though you're beginning to suspect this isn't about toenails at all. After a long pause, he finally says, "Your name is being considered for inscription." You freeze. On an upcoming scroll, a minor one, public hygiene and ceremonial grooming protocols. You blink again. "My name?" He shrugs. "Or your title, depends how long you survive." Historians still argue whether service workers in ancient Egypt ever got recorded by name in ceremonial documents, or if most were reduced to their task alone. But if there's even a chance your name could be inked into state parchment, something no one can erase without divine permission, you're not about to complain. On your way back, you take the long route through the garden court. It's a risky detour, technically off limits during mid-morning meal prep, but worth it. The flowering sycamores are in bloom. Bees bob lazily between the blossoms, and the air carries a hint of cinnamon from the baker's quarter. You sit beneath a pomegranate tree and let the sun settle on your face. Then you hear the bell, low, metallic, and ominous. Not the temple bell, not the meal bell, and definitely not the laundry bell. You sigh, that's the accident bell. Sure enough, a servant rushes by moments later. "Emergency in the antechamber," she blurts. "Toenail related?" "Of course." You bolt upright, sandals slapping the stone. Turns out one of the younger nobles, a distant cousin of the pharaoh, decided to emulate his royal cousin's hygiene routine, but lacking both the training and your steady hand, he attempted a sandal ceremony without adequate foot prep. The result? A torn nail, a bleeding heel, and a shrieking fit loud enough to startle temple cats. You arrive just as two attendants are dabbing his foot with cool wine and muttering apologies. "Get the toe man," someone whispers. You step forward. The noble, a boy really, barely old enough to grow a convincing chin strap, glares at you as if it's your fault his vanity betrayed him. "I need to walk in the reed dance tomorrow," he whines. "They'll think I'm sick." You inspect the damage. The nail isn't fully torn, just split awkwardly down the middle. There's swelling, a bit of dried blood, and what looks suspiciously like fig sap. You nod. "I'll need honey, linen strips, and a candle." They fetch it without protest, a minor miracle. You clean the wound gently, whispering a blessing under your breath just loud enough for the noble to hear. He closes his eyes, soothed. Will I still be able to perform? You'll step lightly, like the ibis. He grins, pleased by the comparison. You begin to wrap the toe in tight spirals, alternating cloth and honey. It's not perfect, but it will hold. You finish with a knot that would make a sailor weep with envy. Afterward, as you pack up your kit, the steward leans in. "Nice knot. You should consider training in minor surgical protocol." You laugh. "No thanks. I already work with gods." Back in your quarters, you find a small roll of papyrus waiting for you. No message, just a drawing. It's a foot, very detailed, labeled with strange notations you don't understand. You stare at it for a while, unsure if it's a joke or a test. Then you tuck it under your sleeping mat and lie back. The birds are quieter now. The air hangs heavy and warm. Your hands smell faintly of honey and fig sap, and you swear you hear the echo of the pharaoh's voice, murmuring something about Nubian war paint. Tomorrow, there may be another cracked heel, another cracked ego. But tonight you drift off knowing one thing. Your name, or something like it, might just be written in ink. The next morning, you wake up before the ibis. Again. It's becoming a habit. One of those patterns your bones follow before your thoughts catch up. You sit up slowly, stretch, and reach for your grooming kit. A fresh cloth, a copper file, the little alabaster pot of goose fat balm you've been hoarding since festival week. Outside, the palace is just beginning to rouse. The sandstone walls shimmer with the first blush of dawn, and the corridor stones are still cool under your feet. As you head toward the service wing, a boy with a jug of milk nods to you respectfully. Twice. You pause, that's new. But before you can investigate this double nod phenomenon, a steward intercepts you. You're summoned to the vizier's court. You stop walking. Why? The steward shrugs. He read the foot report. You were not aware there was a foot report. 15 minutes later, you're standing in a high-ceiling chamber decorated with rows of lotus columns and the scent of ink. The vizier sits on a cushioned stool, a roll of papyrus unspooled on his lap. He looks at you the way one might look at a carp that somehow learned to recite poetry. So, he says, you performed a ritual washing, prevented a sandal ceremony catastrophe, and soothed the god king into sleep. You clear your throat. With respect, only the feet were involved. He waves a hand. Semantics. Behind him, another scribe is rapidly sketching. Your face? No. Wait, it's your hands. You glance away before it gets weirder. The vizier rises, walks to a small side table, and lifts a sealed jar. He removes the lid and dips in a finger. Then, with the gravitas of a priest anointing a statue, he smears a single stripe across your arm. This is the royal resin, he intones, used only on honored tools and ceremonial combs. You've earned it. You try not to sneeze. The resin smells like fermented citrus and goat hair. Also, he adds, you're now officially keeper of the lower extremities. That is not the upgrade you hoped for. Still, you bow. I am honored. Don't be, the vizier says dryly. It includes bunions. You leave the court in a strange daze, your arms sticky, your job title upgraded from joke to high-level absurdity. The other servants eye you as you pass, some with pity, some with poorly concealed envy. You return to your station to find a gift left on your workbench, a tiny carved figurine of a foot made of ivory with a note tied around the ankle. It reads, to the one who walks quietly and makes the gods lighter. You don't know who wrote it, but your throat tightens a bit anyway. Back on duty, things go a little differently now. For one, you're allowed to speak during treatments. Not full monologues, mind you, just small observations. Compliments on skin tone, suggestions about sandal choices, a reminder that scorpion oil is not a cure for cracked heels, no matter what the herbalists say. Yeah. You're also given an assistant. She's about your height, maybe younger, and introduces herself as Ninny, former poultry washer. You blink. As in, ducks? Geese, she corrects, dead serious. And one angry ibis. You nod solemnly. That'll prepare you for anything. Together, you begin reorganizing the foot care inventory. Ninny's surprisingly good with resins and oils, and she invents a clever system of clay tags to label the different balm jars. You're halfway through debating whether the royal toe buffer should be stored under polish or ritual when the pharaoh's steward appears. You're needed in the northern garden, he says. Toenail emergency? He shakes his head. It's the princess. The princess. You've never worked on her directly, of course. That's another department entirely, and fiercely protective of its rituals. But rumor has it that she's begun taking interest in alternative treatments. And nothing says alternative like the toenail person. You arrive at the North Garden, a perfectly serene oasis with lotus pools and whispering reeds. The princess is seated beneath a sycamore, flanked by two harpists. Her sandals lie beside her, discarded. One barefoot rests on a cushion, the other elevated on a tiny carved stool. You're the one who fixed the reed dancer, she says without looking at you. You bow. Yes, Highness. My heel's been aching. Too much standing in court. I don't want herbs. I want something clever. You hesitate. Clever? She nods, but relaxing, not too clever. I want to forget I have feet. Well? You glance at Ninny, who raises an eyebrow. You kneel beside the footstool and begin examining the princess's heel. It's not damaged, just dry, overworked and slightly pink from tight sandals. You retrieve the goose fat balm, warm it between your hands, and begin gentle, circular motions. After a few seconds, the princess exhales audibly. That's very convincing, she murmurs. I call it the ibis swirl. She snorts. You made that up. Yes, you say, but it's working, isn't it? Ninny hands you a fine brush dipped in crushed peppermint oil. You gently trace it along the arch, then up to the base of the toes. The princess sighs. Keep going. Later, as you pack your things, the princess says, I want weekly sessions. You bow again. Of course. Oh, she adds, and I'm telling the queen. You freeze. That's generous? No, she says. It's dangerous, but you're interesting. As she walks away, one foot bare, the other already back in her sandal, you realize something new. Your hands, once seen as tools for a lowly, thankless task, are becoming something else entirely. Trusted, invited, and just maybe indispensable. There's a new hum around the palace now, and it's not just the summer flies buzzing in the kitchens, it's you. Your name, still technically unofficial, is starting to drift through courtyards like incense smoke. The sandal bearers whisper it, the linen folders murmur it as they fold ceremonial socks. Even the cat handlers pause mid-hiss to acknowledge your passing. Because last week the princess told the queen, and the queen, she's not a woman to ignore a well-rubbed heel. Your invitation arrives on perfumed papyrus, sealed with carnelian wax in the shape of a lotus. The handwriting is suspiciously elegant, probably a chambermaid with a flair for drama. The message is short. Tomorrow, midday, East Terrace, bring balm. You don't sleep much that night. By noon the next day, you and Ninny are climbing the narrow staircase that leads to the East Terrace. This part of the palace isn't meant for workers. You can tell by how clean the floor is. There's not a scuff mark or heel smudge in sight. Even the air smells filtered, as if it's passed through several layers of royalty before reaching your nose. The queen is reclining beneath an enormous linen canopy, flanked by palm fronds and very quiet servants. She's dressed simply, but radiates that specific kind of power that doesn't need gold to be terrifying. She lifts one finger. You're the foot person? You bow deeply. Yes, your radiance. She studies you a moment, then gestures to a stool beside her. Begin. You exchange a glance with Ninny, half panic, half awe, and step forward. The queen's feet are smaller than you expected, narrow, pale, with high arches and barely a blemish, but one heel bears the telltale signs of ceremonial sandal chafing. You begin carefully, goose fat balm, circular strokes. You whisper something soothing about the Nile's slow bend. Ninny dabs a peppermint cloth gently on the toes. The queen doesn't speak, just closes her eyes. Minutes pass, then softly, I stood for 6 hours during the Wepet Rimpet festival. Do you know what that does to the ankles? You nod, murmuring, terrible inflammation, especially during the barley bloom. She opens one eye. You're not as stupid as your title suggests. You take that as the highest compliment you'll ever receive. The session ends in silence. She doesn't thank you. She doesn't need to. The attendants do, though. 3 of them offer you cold figs and a cup of honeyed water on the way out. Later that evening, another note arrives. No seal this time. Just a single glyph scribbled in haste, a foot stepping forward. It's an invitation to the inner circle. And now things shift again. You're no longer just keeper of the royal toenails. You're sanctified attendant of lower extremity rituals, which admittedly is a mouthful, but it comes with perks. Your chambers are upgraded. There's a small window now, and your own basin, and a stool that doesn't wobble when you sit. Also, there's a robe. It's soft, dyed with real saffron, and embroidered with, you guessed it, tiny gold thread feet. I look like a cult leader for sandals, you mutter. Ninny smirks. A well-paid cult leader. It's true. Your food is warmer now, your portions larger. People who used to bump into you on purpose now step aside. Even the cats blink at you with vague approval. But prestige comes with new duties, namely the weekly foot tribunal. This is not a joke. It is an actual meeting where you review complaints, requests, and foot-related concerns from the inner court. Your first session includes the following: a dancer with a sandal rash requesting ceremonial exemption, a priest who insists that the temple floor tiles are causing toe misalignment, a noble woman convinced her left pinky toe has a better aura than the right. You listen, you nod, you scribble nonsense on a wax tablet. At the end, you declare, henceforth, all ceremonial dancers will soak their feet in lotus tea the night before performance. There is nodding, a ripple of relief. One person claps. And just like that, you've created your first official policy. Historians still argue whether such micro-courts actually existed in Egyptian palaces or whether this is merely a later interpretation from scribal satire texts. But either way, in this moment, it feels entirely real. Later that night, you and Ninny sit under the stars on your upgraded balcony. She's sharpening your nail file with a pumice stone and you're sipping warm barley milk. Do you miss being invisible? She asks. You tilt your head, a little, but I don't miss the smell of that old corridor. You both laugh quietly. Then Nenny says, "You know what we should do?" You look over. "What?" She leans in, conspiratorial. "Start a foot bomb dynasty. We already have the Queen's trust. We just need a catchy name, something divine." You think for a moment, what about Steps of Ra? She pauses. Too aggressive. Soothing Isis? Too suggestive? Peaceful Soul? Now that sounds like a fish. You both collapse into muffled laughter. Down below, the palace torches flicker in their sconces, and somewhere, a temple chant echoes faintly. The scent of myrrh wafts up on the breeze, blending with the distant perfume of night-blooming jasmine. You lean back against the wall, let your shoulders drop. You're still the toenail person, but now you're their toenail person. The next morning begins, as most royal mornings do, with chaos disguised as ceremony. You're summoned before sunrise, not by a steward this time, but by a temple courier with a falcon brooch and very poor communication skills. All he says is, "The high priest of Thoth requests you." You blink blearily. "Me?" He nods once, "For sacred exfoliation." You and Nenny exchange a look that says, "This is either a trap or a promotion." You grab the ritual balm jars just in case. The Temple of Thoth is cool and cavernous, all white limestone and deep shadows. Incense coils in the air like a lazy snake. Rows of scribes sit cross-legged, chanting and copying by lamplight. Their stylus is ticking gently against papyrus. You're escorted through 3 different sanctums before arriving in a chamber that smells overwhelmingly of ink and lavender oil. The high priest is perched on a throne made of carved ibises. His toenails are unexpected. They are long, curved, somewhat talon-like. One of them appears to have been dyed with crushed beetles. "I walk constantly," he says solemnly, "back and forth, reading scrolls. The wisdom of the gods starts in the heel." You nod like that makes perfect sense. "Absolutely, Holiness." He extends one foot. "Descale me." "Well, you've dealt with worse." You kneel and begin carefully softening the nail beds with warm shea balm, taking extra care around the scarab dye. Nenny silently hands you a fresh linen square, then subtly gestures to the scribe nearby who's recording the entire event for posterity. For what it's worth, you give a truly elegant treatment. No sudden movements, even pressure. At one point, the high priest hums a line from an old hymn, eyes half closed. "You work with silence," he says. "The gods approve." You don't reply, but inside your head, a tiny sarcastic voice says, "Please don't canonize me for cuticle management." The session ends with a strange but sincere benediction involving owl feathers and a cup of barley wine. You're not sure if you've just been blessed, hired, or married. Outside the temple, Nenny finally speaks. "I think we just performed divine pedicure. Do you think it'll get us out of foot tribunal next week?" "No," she sighs, "but it probably got us on some kind of priestly rotation." And she's right. Within days, your client list expands again. Priests, scribes, officials who sit too long, elders who miss their soldiering years and now limp ceremonially. Feet, as it turns out, are the one universal denominator in Egyptian hierarchy. Everyone has them. Everyone complains about them. You begin keeping a tiny scroll tucked in your robe, a growing list of foot ailments, patient preferences, and treatment experiments. Nini calls it your toe scroll. You pretend to be insulted, but it is incredibly helpful. One day, a scribe from the northern provinces arrives. He's missing 2 toes and insists this makes him more spiritually aerodynamic. You nod solemnly and write "toe philosopher" in the scroll. Another time, you're summoned to treat a boy, Pharaoh's cousin, who insists his arches sing during storms. You ask what note they sing. He replies mostly D-flat. You record it for science. Still, not everything is strange. Some of it is tender. A former shield bearer from the Nubian border, his sandals worn to paper, sits silently as you soak his cracked soles. You don't ask his stories. He doesn't offer. But when you press a warm cloth to his heel, he squeezes your arm just once. Historians still argue whether court attendants like you had access to such a wide range of palace figures or whether this variety is exaggerated in folk records. But when you're there, in the moment, it all feels oddly plausible. One afternoon, while you're preparing salves for the Queen's latest appointment, you discover Ninny hunched over the balm table, muttering. What are you doing? She holds up a jar, trying a new blend, safflower oil, crushed mint, and a touch of powdered turquoise. Turquoise? For the royal aura. You blink. You just made mood polish. She grins. Exactly. It's ridiculous, but when you apply it to the Queen's instep later that day, she murmurs, "What is that scent?" and waves away 3 stewards just to lie still a few extra minutes. You add Ninny's mood blend to the scroll. By now you've developed a routine. Mornings are for high-priority appointments, nobles, priests, and the occasional ankle-wounded falconer. Afternoons you hold informal training with junior servants, those hoping to join the Court of Souls, your name, not theirs. You teach them filing techniques, massage pressure points, and how to respectfully dodge a sneeze during ceremonial toe washing. You make them chant it, no blood, no jokes, no sudden foot pokes. They're terrible at first. One of them accidentally applies date paste instead of balm. Another tries to buff a heel with sandstone. But gradually they improve. One even invents a clever reed brush that exfoliates without irritation. Do we promote him? Ninny asks. You nod. Sandal Squire First Class. She records it on a palm scrap. Very official. At night, you and Ninny sit in your courtyard, comparing notes, sipping cool tamarind juice. One evening, she asks, "Do you think we're actually helping?" You pause. Then say yes, but don't tell anyone. It'll ruin the image. Because deep down you know the truth. You may still be the royal toenail person, but now you're something else too. Trusted advisor. Unofficial diplomat of discomfort. And, depending on who you ask, patron saint of sandal relief. The next summons comes sealed with red wax, and you already know what that means. Festival season. Wepet Rempet is long over, but here comes Hebsed, the royal rejuvenation celebration. A spectacle of divine renewal, public processions, symbolic races, and an astonishing number of ceremonial outfits that for some reason involve barefoot jogging on hot stones. Your role? To ensure the pharaoh's feet do not betray his divinity, as the note so delicately puts it. You sigh. So, like pedicure bodyguard? Ninny squints at the official order, more like foot whisperer, with backup files. The preparations are intense. You're assigned to a special team of attendants whose sole job, you've given up resisting the puns, is to keep the royal feet in optimal condition during the 3-day ritual marathon. That means morning foot baths in heated lotus milk, afternoon aromatherapy wrappings using cedar-infused linen, hourly inspections of sandal straps for micro-irritation, emergency calluses removal kits hidden in hollow scepters. The pharaoh is young, too young really for a rejuvenation rite, but the court is worried about optics, so everything must be perfect. And by perfect, they mean he must look immortal even when running barefoot across sun-baked limestone in front of thousands. You meet him briefly the night before the ceremony. He's sitting on a low cushion, legs outstretched, eyes heavy, with the boredom only divine children seem to master. "Are you the foot person?" he mumbles. "Yes, your divine incandescence. I hate sandals." You pause. "Many share that view, your radiance." He sighs, wiggles his toes. "I liked my nurse. She used to rub my heels and sing. Can you do that?" You nod. "Of course. Any particular tune?" He shrugs. "Just nothing with crocodiles." Fair enough. That night, you and Ninny prepare a special ritual balm, equal parts date syrup, goose oil, and a trace of juniper. It smells warm, like honeyed wood, and you hope it calms the boy. You arrive before dawn just as the palace begins to stir. The temple trumpets start their practice. Courtiers scurry like beetles in polished linen. Someone is yelling about lotus arrangements. Someone else is arguing with a camel. You kneel before the young pharaoh and begin the balm treatment. His feet are surprisingly unblemished, soft with faint creases. No corns, no cracks, just one oddly square-shaped tan line across the ankle from ceremonial bindings. He relaxes quickly under your touch, humming a little tuneless melody, then whispers, "Do you think they'll cheer?" You glance up. His eyes are open, searching yours. You think about what to say, then softly, "They will, because they'll be looking at a God who never stumbles." He smiles just a little, and you know it was the right thing to say. Historians still debate whether attendants ever spoke so freely to pharaohs, especially during state rituals. But oral histories often include small moments of surprising humanity like this one. Maybe they're exaggerated, maybe not. The parade begins just after the third bell. You and Ninny are posted behind a screen near the main processional path, just out of view, but close enough to spring into action with spare sandals, cool cloths, and secret heel cushions. The pharaoh moves beautifully, lifted by the rhythm of chants and drums. Every few steps he raises his staff, beaming the carefully practiced divine gaze to the crowd. You can't help but be a little proud. Then, of course, comes the race. As part of Hebsed, the pharaoh must jog a sacred lap around the ritual courtyard to demonstrate his enduring strength and cosmic alignment, barefoot. It is frankly a ridiculous tradition in a climate where cobblestones reach egg-frying temperatures by midday. He starts strong. You're watching, fingers crossed, balm at the ready. Then halfway through the second lap, he slows. You see it. A tiny falter in his left step, a blister, probably. You grab your kit, bolt into the hallway, and intercept the detour path he's about to take for his mid-lap refreshment. He sees you breathless and mouths, "Heel, fire!" You crouch, swipe clean, apply the chill balm, and whisper, "Almost done. Just think about floating." He nods and takes off again. Later, the scribes will record that the pharaoh moved as swift as Ra's own chariot. They'll draw heroic images of his divine run, not a single toe out of place. No one will ever mention the blister, but you'll know you were there. You saved the soul of the two lands. After the ritual, as the sun dips behind the palm trees and the court drinks and dances and overpraises a papyrus float shaped like a hippo, you find a moment of peace in the shade. Ninny flops beside you, barefoot, holding a half-eaten honey cake. You did it. You stopped divine chafing. You nod, exhausted, and in under 10 seconds, that's a palace record, you raise your cup to the blister that almost undid an empire. She clinks hers against yours. And for a moment, in that golden hush of post-festival fatigue, you feel something rare. Not pride, not power, just the soft, silly joy of doing your job well, of knowing that for 3 shining days the feet of Egypt stood steady because of you. By now, your reputation has grown so strange and specific that you barely notice the odd requests anymore. One morning, a messenger appears at your chamber door holding a tray with a single papyrus scroll, a piece of flint, and a roasted onion. You raise an eyebrow. He bows and announces you are invited to treat the feet of General Horemheb, who has been struck with the curse of onion foot. You wait a beat. Is that an official diagnosis? He shrugs. His words, not mine. You sigh, grab your kit, and follow him through a maze of military tents, past training yards where soldiers spar with short swords, and one man who appears to be wrestling a donkey. When you arrive, General Horemheb is sitting on a stool with both feet submerged in a bowl of pickled beer. It burns, he growls, but it feels righteous. You squat beside him and try not to laugh. Tell me how this started. He gestures to his sandal. Left it too close to the cook fire, smelled onions for days, can't get rid of it. Now the lads are calling me shallot toes. You glance over the blackened strap, sniff once, and confirm that yes, his toes do reek of caramelized soup base. It takes 2 scrubbings, a goat milk soak, and a generous amount of mint salve. But eventually, the smell lifts. The general insists on giving you a carved scarab as thanks. You suspect he whittled it himself. That, Ninny says later, examining it, is clearly shaped like a turnip. Shh, you whisper. It's a token of victory. Your life continues like this, one absurd honor after another. You're summoned to treat a nobleman's scroll foot, the result of too much sitting while copying edicts. You meet a dancer who requests her toes be painted with crushed lapis so the gods notice when I twirl. You help design a custom heel wedge for a very anxious tax official whose left leg is longer than his right. By now, you've become something of a fixture in the palace. Servants bow as you pass, guards nod in silent camaraderie, and even the crocodile keepers stop offering you advice on foot fungus. Historians still argue whether a role like yours existed formally, or if records like the Book of Souls were parodies created by scribes with too much free time. But in the daily swirl of duty and drama, you're too busy to question your place. One afternoon, as you're inventorying sandal straps, you hear an urgent commotion. The queen, a guard whispers, has a splinter. You and Ninny exchange a glance. That sounds serious? It's royal, so yes. You're escorted at top speed through the queen's garden, a quiet sanctuary of papyrus ponds, pink lotus blooms, and carefully arranged frogs. In the center, the queen is perched on a cushion, one foot delicately raised, expression somewhere between bored and furious. Right foot ball, I stepped on a ceremonial incense cone, she explains. You crouch to inspect. It is, in fact, a splinter, a dainty one, possibly cedar. But the queen is not here for amusement. She taps her goblet. The priests are debating whether it's a divine omen. I think it's just poor housekeeping. You extract it with a flick of your obsidian tweezer and apply a balm of clove and fig sap. She exhales in visible relief. Tell no one, she mutters, especially the priesthood. Your lips are sealed. In the days that follow, you notice a curious shift. More people start requesting precautionary visits. You begin making the rounds not just for active ailments, but to prevent them. A sign of real status, apparently, is having your feet so pampered they never hurt in the first place. And so you invent the Royal Soul Screening, a complete inspection, massage, and aura polishing session that becomes incredibly trendy among senior bureaucrats. Ninny starts sketching possible logos. Now, what about a foot cradled by 2 lotus blossoms? You raise an eyebrow. Too medical? Okay, what about a cat licking a sandal? Somehow worse. Still, the work flows in. So much so that you take on an apprentice. His name is Kibi, he's 14, and he has the patience of a demigod. He can file a callus without looking, catch falling salve jars mid-air, and memorize every client's sandal size. Ninny calls him the heel heir. You watch him work one day, gently guiding a noble's foot into a soaking basin, murmuring a blessing under his breath, and you feel something odd and soft bloom in your chest. Pride. You never planned any of this. You were drafted into a job nobody wanted. But now, you've built something real, not glamorous, not powerful, but reliable, gentle, quietly revered. At dusk, you sit in your usual courtyard, rubbing oil into your own tired hands. Ninny joins you, sets down 2 bowls of lentil stew. We're doing good, she says simply. You nod, and no one's exploded from sandal rash this week. Progress. She raises a spoon. To the toe scroll. You tap yours back. Long may it grow. And in that moment, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and roasted garlic, the sound of frogs singing from the queen's pond, and the fading gold of the Nile twilight, you realize something. There may be stranger jobs in Egypt, but none more sacredly ridiculous than yours. The dry season creeps in like a whisper, and with it comes sandal rash season. It's subtle at first. A few more requests for aloe paste. A merchant's assistant with red heels. Then a whole battalion of scribes limping into the infirmary as if they've marched across burning dunes, not walked from the archives. I blame papyrus dust, Ninny mutters, wrapping another linen poultice. It gets in the straps, forms little dagger colonies. You nod sagely, though you suspect the issue is more complex. Dry weather, long hours, and perhaps, tragically, the new trend in performance sandals made of stiff imported flax. Yes, imported. Yes, extremely uncomfortable. But they're fashionable among priests now, so naturally everyone wants a pair, even if they squeak and leave splinters. You make a note, propose a balm-infused sock. Kibi, ever the innovator, begins mixing pumice and beeswax into a kind of heel salve brick. You test it on your own foot. It works surprisingly well, cooling, smoothing, even a little pepperminty. He beams, I call it kebaway. You pause. We may need to workshop that name. Meanwhile, the high priest of Thoth, an anxious man with exquisite toenails, summons you to his chambers. He's developed a mysterious itching between his toes and suspects divine interference. You kneel, inspect the area, and delicately suggest it might be an ordinary fungal bloom. A common affliction. He looks scandalized. Surely not. These toes were consecrated during the Festival of Reeds. You gently explain that divine consecration is not a guarantee against sweat. Historians still debate the intersection of medicine and magic in ancient Egyptian foot care. Some claim ointments were purely symbolic, meant to align the body with sacred geometry. Others argue the Egyptians simply liked soft feet. In any case, you prescribe a daily rinse with vinegar and marsh mint, plus a no incense between the toes rule. Back at your workshop, requests keep pouring in. People are starting to bring in objects for sandal blessing. A crocodile farmer arrives with a reed mat worn down from hours of standing. A potter requests a foot stencil for making ergonomic clay footwear. A scribe presents a papyrus draft of the first official guide to proper arch support. The final title? Steps Toward Eternity, Souls in the Afterlife. You read it over lunch. Chapter 2 is just a list of gods and the type of footwear they were thought to wear. Nenni reads it aloud in a dramatic voice. Sobek, tall boots with reinforced heels. Sekhmet, nothing, prefers barefoot rage. You nearly choke on your lentils. One evening, Kibi hesitantly approaches with a rolled scroll. I drafted a client poem. You blink. A what? He clears his throat and reads. O keeper of souls, with fingers wise, you scrape, you balm, you harmonize. From calloused priest to dancer's toes, you bring sweet peace where sandal goes. You stare. Kebi, it rhymes. He turns bright red. Too much? Too wonderful, you murmur. That week, you're invited to the annual banquet of the Lesser Attendants Guild, a gathering of people whose jobs are considered auxiliary but essential. You know, the ones who keep everything running without ever being mentioned in statues. You're seated next to a scribe who specializes in tomb inventory scrolls. Mostly I count amulets. A temple cat wrangler, and a woman who translates dreams into official metaphors. The food is simple. Grilled fish, honeyed bread, and melon slices, but the laughter is rich. Everyone has a story. Everyone has seen things. Once, the amulet counter says, I had to argue with a ghost about the location of his own burial scarab. The dream translator nods. I had a prince who dreamed he was a giraffe 3 nights in a row. Interpretation? Felt unseen, wanted longer neck. You feel oddly comforted. You're not alone in your weirdness. The woman seated across from you turns out to be the royal armpit oiler. Yes, really. Mostly it's ceremonial, she says, sipping wine, but sometimes it's preventive. You clink goblets, kindred spirits. At the banquet's end, there's a small award ceremony, nothing official, just for fun. You're awarded most likely to save a soul without being noticed. You give a modest bow. As the night winds down and the moon casts silver over the courtyard, you find yourself sitting beside the papyrus pond, listening to frogs and laughter and distant lyre music. You think about all the feet you've tended, all the quiet little rescues, the lives you've touched, sometimes literally, sometimes with just the right balm at the right moment. You didn't plan this path, but somehow you've walked it into meaning. And as the breeze rustles the lotus leaves and cools your tired hands, you realize something. You've built a legacy, not one carved in stone, but one that walks softly, steadily towards something good. The river's changing again. The Nile, your quiet neighbor in Egypt's ever-patient spine, begins its slow, deliberate rise. The flood season is near. And with it, something odd happens. Your patients start arriving barefoot. It's ceremonial, one woman tells you, her hem soaked to the knees. We walk the banks to greet Hapi, god of the flood. No sandals allowed. You nod, even as you wipe away the muddy streaks from her heels. She's the 6th person this week to arrive with reeds stuck between her toes. Kibi invents a rinse, warm lotus tea with a splash of vinegar and 2 drops of myrrh. You call it river relief. It becomes very popular, especially after a priest claims it cured his toe melancholy. And then something stranger happens. The palace assigns you an official Nile duty title, Scribe of Souls and River Readiness. There's even a small parade. You ride in a ceremonial boat, holding a symbolic sandal aloft while people toss flower petals at your feet. You know, Ninny remarks later, there are worse things than becoming a national symbol of clean toes. Like what? She smirks. Court astrologer. Always wrong, never forgiven. As the waters continue to rise, the palace prepares for its yearly washing of the thresholds, a ritual meant to purify every stone path walked by royalty. Naturally, your department is called in to prepare the ceremonial sandals. This means a week of polishing, conditioning, scenting, and gently aligning 38 pairs of leather footwear by rank and zodiac sign. Kebi takes it seriously. He sets up a special rack, labels everything meticulously. High priest, right foot prone to wobble, and even organizes a sandal rotation chart. You host a small exhibit. It draws a modest crowd, mostly curious children, and one elderly woman who insists a certain heel is haunted. She calls it the ghost slipper. Historians still puzzle over how much symbolic weight the Egyptians placed on footwear. Some believe sandals were magical vessels, protection from chaos embodied by sharp stones and wandering beetles. Others say they were simply fashion and function. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between, a little god, a little fungus, a lot of dust. During the festival, you're stationed near the grand entrance, where priests chant blessings and servants sprinkle rose water. One by one, people pass you to receive ritual anointing. It's not fancy. You dab oil on the tops of their feet and whisper a quiet blessing you mostly make up as you go. May your steps be cool. May your path be gentle. May no pebble turn against you. That last one always gets a smile. Then, one day, someone doesn't smile. She's maybe 10 years old, wrapped in a hand-me-down linen shawl. She doesn't speak as she holds out her foot, but you see the cuts. Old ones. Barefoot, too long, maybe always. You clean the wounds, wrap them gently, and offer a small pouch of balm. Her hand hovers before she takes it, as if unsure she's allowed. You don't say anything, just give her a wink and the blessing. As she walks away, she looks taller somehow. Later, Kebi asks, why'd you give her the good myrrh balm? You shrug. The other stuff didn't rhyme with destiny. He nods as if that makes sense. After the festival, your team is suddenly inundated with requests from other cities. Letters arrive on bird parchment. Can you teach a traveling troupe how to prevent performance blisters? Will you design sandals for crocodile worshippers in Esna? Is there a preferred foot cream for those who sleep standing? Ninny suggests franchising. The Temple of Toes. We open one in every district. Only if you're high priestess. She bows. I accept. You don't quite franchise, but you do agree to a traveling tour. It's framed as a pilgrimage of padding, and you're accompanied by a small entourage. Kebi, Ninny, 2 donkeys, and a scribe named Many, who insists on documenting everything you do in verse form. Your first stop is a village by the delta where people fish barefoot in marshes. You teach them how to stitch soft reed liners into their foot wraps. Your second stop is near Memphis, where a noblewoman insists you examine her marble foot bath for soul interference. You nod, hum thoughtfully, and recommend rose petals and a salt scrub. She weeps with relief. Your third stop is an outpost along the caravan trail. Here, merchants trudge for miles, and sandal failure is catastrophic. You give a small public talk, well, more of a fireside chat, on heel stitching and the virtues of preemptive callus softening. A camel chews loudly in the background the entire time. Still, they seem moved. Many scribbles in his scroll. The words, they massage the ears. Is that good? It's profound. After 3 weeks, you return to Thebes dusty, sun-kissed, and deeply aware of how many types of foot problems exist. And everywhere you went, you left behind something, knowledge, a joke, a recipe, or just a little kindness. That night, Ninny lays out all the gifts you received. A sandal charm carved from palm wood, a clay dish shaped like a foot, a poem that begins, O toes that walk, the gods awake. You stare at them, a little dazed. Then you sit down, pick up your carving tools, and begin making something in return. A sandal, but not for anyone else. This one's for you. You finish the sandal at dusk. It's not flashy, not inlaid with lapis or gilded with silver thread like the ones reserved for high priests and royal brides, but it fits you perfectly. The heel is gently cupped, the strap soft and firm where it should be. You line the sole with dried mint leaves, not for fashion, but for the quiet rustle they make when you walk. Kebby calls it a sandal with a sole. You wear it to the next appointment, a noble steward with mysterious heel pain, and as you walk through the temple courtyard, you hear a boy whisper, "That's the royal toenail keeper." You pretend not to hear. But later, Nenny teases you mercilessly. Royal title, custom sandals. When do the statues go up? You roll your eyes, right after they carve yours, high priestess of bandages and sass. She bows, let it be known. Requests keep arriving, some familiar, some strange. A fisherman wants a waterproof sandal that won't slide on slimy rocks. A priest of Hathor is suffering heel melancholy during rituals. A chorus of dancers seeks your advice on padding that won't muffle their ceremonial stomps. You find yourself inventing words. Stomp stability, heel buoyancy, crocodile-compatible toe freedom. Meanwhile, the high priest of Ra sends an urgent message. He wants a consultation. Your first thought, oh no, his toenails again. But when you arrive, he's pacing nervously, his ceremonial headdress slightly askew. He gestures at a throne-like chair made entirely of polished ebony and inlaid ivory. I need advice. You wait. I think my sandals are cursed. You blink. Cursed? He nods solemnly. Every time I wear them, I trip. You gently examine the sandals. The straps are stiff, the heel too high. The toe guard, decorative but deadly. Your sandals aren't cursed, you say. They're just badly designed. He leans forward, whispering, as if you've revealed a cosmic secret. Can you fix them? You can and do. You redesign the entire pair, broader straps, a supportive arch, a soft leather sole with etched sun motifs. He tries them on and sighs audibly. These feel holy. You smile. They're supposed to. You leave with a satchel full of honey cakes and a scroll of blessing written in gold ink. That night, you fall asleep wondering how many pairs of feet you've helped without ever seeing the faces. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. You don't keep track anymore. Historians still argue about the extent of personal care in ancient Egypt. Some believe attendants like you were mere tools, silent, unseen, replaceable. Others argue the opposite, that intimacy, discretion, and devotion were what elevated your role to something sacred. You know which side you'd bet on. The next morning, something unusual happens. A group of apprentices arrives outside your workshop, young, nervous, holding mismatched sandals and papyrus sheets. We want to learn. You glance at Kebby. He shrugs. Guess we're teachers now. Nenny doesn't shrug. She claps her hands. About time. You assign each apprentice a nickname, Pebble, Sandal Strap, Lefty, Callus, and begin your impromptu school of soulcraft. Lessons include proper soaking techniques, the difference between ritual and practical oils, and how to politely explain to a noble woman that, no, lavender doesn't actually cure foot numbness. By the end of week 1, Lefty designs a sandal for elderly priests who shuffle. It has small internal ridges to keep the foot stable. Pebble accidentally invents a toe separator. Callus writes a song about corn removal that is surprisingly catchy. And Sandal Strap? She recreates your mint-lined sole idea with time instead. It smells like walking through an herb garden. You're proud of them. Each one strange, brilliant, and slightly ridiculous, just like you. Word spreads. One afternoon, you receive a formal letter sealed with the royal cartouche. It's from the pharaoh. He's heard of your work. He invites you to the palace, not as a servant, but as a consultant of the sacred step. You blink at the parchment, reread it, then show it to Nenny. She bursts out laughing. Told you, statues. You don't make a scene, you pack quietly, bring your tools, your scrolls, your sandals. The palace is more ornate than you remember. Walls painted with gold and ochre, floors tiled with lapis, servants gliding past like smoke. They lead you through a side entrance, then a hallway, then into a quiet room. The pharaoh is sitting there. He's younger than expected, stern, yes, but not unkind. He gestures for you to sit. I walk every morning, he says, along the eastern colonnade, and every morning my right heel aches. You say nothing. Wait. He exhales. I have everything, but I can't walk in peace. You kneel, gently examine his foot. You notice the uneven pressure, the overworked arch, the telltale sign of too tight straps. You recommend a specific sandal type. Show him a sketch. Describe the benefits. He nods, then pauses. Why does this matter so much to you? You look up, smile softly, because everyone deserves to walk in peace. He studies you, then stands, the conversation done, but as you rise to leave, he adds, I hope you'll stay, teach the palace artisans, help the others. Your work, it's healing. You don't reply. You don't have to. The palace gives you a suite. Well, not quite a suite, more like an unused music room filled with reed flutes and an abandoned harp missing 2 strings. But it's quiet, it's yours, and someone has kindly left a bowl of dates on the windowsill. Kaby and Nenny join you 2 days later, towing your workshop tools in a cart stacked comically high. This room echoes, Kaby notes, testing it with a single loud clap. Good, Nenny says. Echoes give everything gravitas, especially foot care. You set up shop in a sunlit alcove, rolling out your now famous sandal diagrams, while the apprentices sweep the floors and try not to trip over harp strings. The palace artisans, at first suspicious, soon begin to visit out of curiosity, then interest, then admiration. They bring you strange projects. One wants to craft walking sandals for a noble giraffe the palace keeps for ceremonial parades. Another proposes an ambitious sandal shoe hybrid for silent walking during palace espionage. You recommend soft papyrus padding. He writes it down with fervor. A third asks if you can build elevated sandals tall enough to walk above the sand. Like stilts, you ask? Like dignity, he replies. You smile and promise to consider it. The days pass slowly, each one quieter than the last. You find a rhythm. Morning consultations, midday lectures, evening experiments with sandal linings, including one unfortunate test involving fish scales. You never do that again. Historians still puzzle over the degree of innovation in everyday Egyptian life. Some argue it was all stagnation and tradition, a civilization too fond of its rituals to ever evolve. Others see evidence of constant quiet progress, people adjusting, experimenting, finding comfort in tiny improvements that made life just a little easier. You know which side your sandal is on. One evening, you're invited to a private dinner with the palace physicians. They wear immaculate linen robes and speak in slow practice metaphors. You sit beside a woman named Hentepi who specializes in dreams. She listens intently as you describe the differences in heel tension across social classes. Then she smiles. You treat the soul through the soul. You groan. Please don't make that a thing. Too late. She's already scrawling it on a linen napkin. Later, after dessert, which turns out to be pomegranate with sugared lotus root, one of the scribes asks you, do you ever miss being anonymous? You pause. I miss the quiet. They nod. Everyone understands. The next morning, the pharaoh sends word. He wants to show you something. You're led through a private garden where tame ibis birds wander between papyrus fronds. The pharaoh is waiting beside a low stone bench. In front of him, a single ancient sandal. It's brittle with age, the leather cracked and curling. The insole is stuffed with faded herbs. This belonged to my great-grandfather, he says. They say he wore it to the oracle of Siwa, and that he returned a changed man. You examine it carefully. The craftsmanship is exquisite, the stitching almost invisible. You suspect it was made by someone like you, someone who cared more about balance than beauty. I'd like you to recreate it, the pharaoh says quietly. For me. You agree, of course. It takes a week. You use soft palm bark layered with papyrus and an inner lining of gently crushed rosemary and frankincense, your own twist, your own little blessing. When it's done, you present it in silence. He holds it in both hands, breathes in deeply, then says, I'll wear it to temple, quietly, no announcements. You nod, you understand. Later that night, Nenny finds you staring at the stars from your window. She hands you a cup of warm barley milk and asks what you're thinking. You point upward, just wondering how many feet have walked under these same stars. She leans her head against your shoulder, enough to make the stars feel useful. You smile, sip your drink, and beneath your bed, your own sandal rests quietly, mint leaves slightly crushed, waiting for tomorrow. You wake before the sun, not because you have to, but because it's peaceful. The palace garden is still asleep, save for the occasional rustle of ibis wings or the lazy burble of the lotus pond. You take your morning walk, sandals soft against the stone paths, the scent of rosemary still clinging from the day before. You pass a servant sweeping with a brush made of reeds. He bows slightly. May your souls walk softly. You blink. That's new. Ninny thinks it's a catchphrase now. Just wait, she laughs. Next thing you know, you'll be quoted on clay cups. She's not far off. By midday, 2 market vendors arrive at your workshop. They've started selling soothing sandal salve as used by the royal stepkeeper. You politely correct their claims. It's not your salve. It smells more like pickled onions than anything you'd ever apply to skin. They nod earnestly. Still, good branding. Kibi's more amused than you. At least no one sculpted a sandal-shaped shrine to you yet. You look at him deadpan, that you know of. Requests from across Egypt start pouring in. A Nubian messenger brings scrolls wrapped in blue linen. Requests from traveling dancers. A Theban noblewoman asks for a ceremonial foot-soothing routine for her pet baboon. You consider this carefully. Baboons, after all, are terrible clients, no patience, and they bite. You decide a sandal is unnecessary. You send her a soothing clay foot pad recipe instead. More and more, your apprentices begin taking over day-to-day consultations. Pebble specializes in sandals for long-distance runners. Sandal Strap has begun engraving poems into the inner souls. One noblewoman bursts into tears upon discovering her sandal whispers, "You are already enough." Lefty invents a dual sandal system for people who can't tell left from right. Calisi designs a sandal with a hidden compartment for snacks. It is, against all reason, a hit with scribes. Historians still debate the scope of ancient Egyptian innovation in footwear. There are fragments of sandals buried with kings, but also practical leather soles found in workers' tombs. Was it a matter of class, of purpose, of climate? Or was it, as you suspect, the quiet work of everyday inventors like you, crafting comfort one strap at a time? One afternoon, a scroll arrives sealed with a symbol you haven't seen in years. The House of Life. The great library in Heliopolis. They invite you to give a lecture. You stare at the scroll for a long moment before saying anything. Why would they want me? Ninny snorts. You know things, you teach things, you make sandals that feel like hugs. Kibi adds, you're the only person I know who can describe callous placement and make it poetic. You accept. The journey to Heliopolis is long, dusty, and full of misadventure. A wheel breaks on the cart, a monkey steals your lecture scroll. One of the apprentices accidentally glues a sandal to a goat. Eventually, you arrive. The House of Life is enormous. Towering columns, walls etched with spells and anatomy charts. The scribes wear robes so white they seem to glow. You're ushered into a hall filled with students. You speak, not with fanfare, not with the voice of a priest or orator, just you. You speak about care, about attention, about how sometimes the smallest discomforts tell the biggest stories, about the quiet power of noticing. You describe a sandal as a conversation between ground and body, a tiny architecture of purpose and mercy. When you finish, there is silence, then applause, soft and sincere like falling rain. Afterwards, an old scribe approaches you with shaking hands. I never thought about feet, he says. You made me feel like I should. You pat his shoulder gently. They carry more than we think. The next day, the House of Life gifts you a set of rare inks, deep indigo, copper red, lapis black, and a blank scroll titled The Book of Souls. It's a joke, surely, but you write in it anyway. And each night after that, you add one quiet entry. Not a manual, not a manifesto, just memories. Like the boy whose feet tickled too easily, the dancer who cried, the priest who swore sandal tightness affected the god's moods, the pharaoh who finally walked without pain. You don't know who will read it. Maybe no one, but it feels good to leave a trail behind. You return to Memphis with ink-stained fingers and sunburned shoulders. Ninny greets you at the gates with a garland of garlic blossoms for protection and for your breath. And KB pretends not to cry when he sees the copper-red ink set. Callus has redesigned the workshop. There are now labeled baskets for every tool, sandal prototypes displayed like tiny gods along the walls, and a chalkboard where the apprentices vote on the most comfortable design of the week. This week's winner is a pair of shock-absorbent goat leather slippers with adjustable reeds. Reeds, Lefty says gravely, are the future. You resume your rhythm, though things feel slower now, more saturated. Word is spread. You're no longer just the keeper of royal toenails. You're he who understands arches, the one who listens to ankles, the priest of pressure points. Some titles are more flattering than others. One day, a courier from the necropolis arrives with a request. An old stonecutter is dying. He wants his burial sandals made by you. You hesitate, not because you're afraid, but because burial sandals are more than footwear. They're a statement of how you want to walk into the afterlife. You visit him. His name is Minka. His voice is soft. His hands are hard as stone. He smiles when you enter. I wore your sandals 20 years ago, carved 3 tombs in them, never got a blister. You sit beside him. Ask what kind of journey he imagines after death. He closes his eyes. Cool sand, a long walk, stars that don't blink. You return to the workshop and begin. You use pale linen, dyed with crushed indigo, lined with soft sheep wool. You stitch tiny lapis chips into the straps, so he'll be recognized by the gods. Inside the sole, you press a single line in hieroglyphs. Stone remembers those who walk lightly. Historians still argue whether burial sandals were functional or symbolic. Were they actually worn or crafted purely for ritual? Some tombs have pristine sandals. Others show wear, scuffs, sweat-darkened leather. You suspect the answer is both. Some people want to arrive looking perfect. Others want to arrive real. Minka's funeral is quiet. You place the sandals beside him, not on his feet. He preferred to be barefoot in the end. Let the gods see me as I am, he said. You oblige. Afterwards, you walk alone along the edge of the Nile. The sun is setting, gold lapping at your toes. A fisherman waves from a reed canoe. He's wearing a pair of your earliest designs, uneven, unpolished, somehow still intact. It makes you laugh. That night you dream of stairs, long, endless stairs made of soft leather and stitched papyrus. You climb them barefoot. At the top, there's only sky. You wake with an idea. Back in the workshop, you tell the apprentices, what if sandals didn't just follow the foot, but taught it to move better? Pebble blinks. Like educational footwear? Exactly, you say. Sandalstrap is intrigued. Can we teach them to walk backwards without falling? You shrug. Let's find out. Soon the workshop is covered in prototypes. Balancing sandals, rhythm sandals, even a prototype called the diplomatic sole, meant to help aristocrats glide gracefully across awkward banquets. One day you get a visit from a royal dancer. She has bunions, sore heels, a permanently bruised toe from stepping on ceremonial bricks. You examine her foot and say your sandals are working against you. She sighs, so are most people. You design her a pair that lifts the heel, relieves the arch, and allows just enough toe wiggle for dignity. She cries when she wears them. They feel like home, she whispers. You nod. That's the goal. Historians still debate the role of artisans in ancient Egypt. Were they inventors, servants, something in between? The records are murky, but you know. You live in the soft margins of civilization, the seam where comfort meets survival. And that seam is stitched by hand. You begin taking fewer clients, teaching more, letting the apprentices grow. You write late at night in the Book of Souls. Some entries are practical. Boiled flax makes for excellent arch support. Others are strange. A goose feather beneath the heel encourages humility. But mostly they're memories, little prayers in leather and thread. The palace no longer calls as often, but you don't mind. The quiet suits you. One evening, Ninny asks, if you weren't doing this, what would you do? You laugh, I'd probably be a baker. She tilts her head. A baker? Yeah, except I'd still probably shape bread like sandals. She groans. You need help. You nod desperately. She hands you a sandal. Then start with this. It needs a new sole. You blink. You mean soul? She smirks. No, soul. You hold it up to the lamplight, examine its curve, and whisper, let's make you sing again. You're in the middle of repairing a sandal with a broken strap when a boy appears at the workshop door. He's no more than 10, dusty face, wide eyes, holding a scroll. You sigh, set the sandal down. You're not lost, are you? No, he says, I was sent. You raise an eyebrow. The pharaoh's cousin's chamberlain's wife has a goat. It refuses to walk. They think it's the sandals. You pause. Wait, the goat is wearing sandals? The boy nods gravely. 4, 1 on each hoof. Kibi leans over your shoulder. I'll go. I've always wanted to argue with livestock. The boy grins, clearly relieved. He skips away as Kebi grabs his toolkit and mutters something about hoof ergonomics. You return to your strap. The days have grown quieter again, not empty, just slow. Like the Nile at dusk, the apprentices are more capable than ever. Nenny has taken over scheduling. Sandalstrap is writing poetry about feet, mostly terrible but heartfelt. Pebble is deep into a research project comparing goose leather elasticity to camel hide. Callus is inventing sandals with tiny built-in bells for musical walking. And Lefty has finally figured out left from right, mostly. You begin working on a new sandal design that feels like walking on cool clay. You mix river mud with fine sand and bake it into flexible soles. It cracks after a few steps. You try again. The 6th attempt feels promising. You write in the Book of Souls, failure is just the foot missing its step. Try again. Historians still puzzle over the personal writings of ancient artisans. Some scrolls have been found with marginal notes, fragments of love songs, jokes, even complaints about beetles in the workshop. But no full memoirs, no clear insight into what a sandal maker truly thought. Yours might be the first. One morning, a delegation from Nubia arrives. Not nobles, not soldiers, just a village healer, her daughter, and a worn piece of bark with your name scratched on it. She bows, then hands you a sandal, crude, heavy, worn nearly to holes. It's yours, she says. You blink. That's not mine. She smiles. It was copied from one we saw at market years ago. Saved my husband's feet after he stepped on a cursed thorn. You look closer. It is a perfect imitation of one of your early designs, clunky but dependable. You remember that pair. Gave it to a traveling salt merchant who limped. The healer says, we made dozens after that, shared them with the village. The daughter adds, we call them dream feet. Your throat tightens. You give them new pairs, custom fitted, and teach them how to reinforce the soles with palm fiber. They stay 2 nights, then vanish down the river, leaving behind a carved wooden model of a foot with thank you etched along the ankle. You place it in the window. Tourists begin showing up, not many, just enough to notice. They ask to see the famous sandals. You show them the ugliest ones first, the ones that broke, that rubbed, that failed, then the ones that worked, the in-betweens, the laughably experimental. You let them try them on, walk in circles, giggle. One elderly man weeps after slipping into a pair. I haven't walked without pain in 30 years, he whispers. You hold his arm as he takes another step. The Book of Souls now contains over 300 entries. Some are diagrams, some are poems. One is just a squashed beetle print with the note, Unwanted Apprentice. And one is a letter addressed to the future keeper of souls. You don't know who that will be, but you write anyway. You won't always be understood, it says. People will think you just make sandals, but what you really make is peace, one quiet step at a time. Historians still argue over the legacy of Egyptian artisans. Were they innovators or imitators? You chuckle as you copy the sole of a fish into a sandal tread for improved grip. Innovator. Later, you find Lefty trying to convince a cat to model paw sandals. You shake your head. We don't work with cats. Why not? They never tip. That evening, Nenny curls up beside you on the workshop roof. She gazes at the stars. Do you think they wear sandals? The gods? She nods. Only when they visit mortals, you say. Otherwise, they hover just to be smug. She laughs, then asks, when did this stop being just a job? You pause. Somewhere between the goat and the diplomat, you say. She smiles. You've changed. So have you. You both sit in silence, the city humming below, the night warm against your skin. You think about sandals, about souls, about how feet wear the story of everything we do, and how with the right strap and stitching, even the most tired feet can learn to dream again. You wake to the sound of laughter in the courtyard. Not apprentice laughter. This is deeper, older, the kind of chuckle that says, I've seen things. You peer over the edge of your rooftop cot and spot a man with a white beard holding up a sandal like it's a divine relic. That's it, he declares. That's the one that kept my toes intact through the flood of the sixth gnome. You squint. The sandal in question is decidedly ordinary, one of your early practice pairs, if memory serves. The apprentices are hanging on his every word. Pebble is sketching him. Sandalstrap is noting quotes. Callus is polishing the sandal like it's about to be buried with a pharaoh. You come downstairs, arms crossed, and who exactly are you? He grins. Just a man who owes his life to a well-stitched strap. You roll your eyes but hand him a fresh pair. Take these. I promise they won't dissolve in puddles. He bows low, sandals in hand, and vanishes back into the city. You'll never see him again. But a week later, a scroll arrives. To the Keeper of Souls, it begins. The man has written a full travelogue, how the sandals helped him outrun a runaway melon cart, negotiate peace between feuding herders, and even impress a foreign merchant's daughter. At the bottom, a simple sketch of your old pair on a pedestal with the caption, The Hero's Footwear. You pin it to the workshop wall. There's something happening now, a shift in how people see your work. Not just functional, but magical, mythical even. It begins with rumors. They say your sandals never wear out, that they cure limps, that they protect against curses, bad dreams, and overly talkative neighbors. Kibi starts marketing anti-gossip soles. They sell out. You try to temper the myth-making. They're just sandals, you remind a merchant one day. He shakes his head. No, they're a reason to walk again. Historians still question the line between craftsmanship and cult. When does useful become sacred? How does a tool become a totem? Your workshop walks that line daily. One evening, an acrobat arrives. A woman with ankles like braided rope. She's torn 3 pairs of sandals in a week. I leap more than I walk, she explains. You study her feet. Narrow, calloused, tough. You try 3 different designs before settling on one with flexible reed joints and lotus silk straps. She bounces in place, grins, and flips backward out the door. The apprentices cheer. You've done it, Lefty says. Sandals for the air. The next project is stranger still. A priest wants silent sandals. Not just soft soles, but ones that whisper less than a beetle in love. You create a pair with layered felt and snakeskin lining. He glides out of the workshop, nodding solemnly. You should charge more for mystery, he says. You write that down. Meanwhile, you've begun a small display wall, not for clients, for yourself. Each sandal has a name. First blister, river slip, left too long in the sun. It's a museum of mistakes, but also of persistence and strange beauty. The apprentices add their own. Too much glue. Not enough glue. Why did it catch fire? Visitors find the wall curious. Some laugh, some look reverent. You overhear a traveler whisper to her companion, these are the real relics. The ones that didn't get it right, but tried. That night, Nenny brings you a scroll she found in the archives. It's ancient, brittle, nearly dust, but on it is a sketch, faint, crude, unmistakable. A sandal, strapped like yours, with notations on pressure points, arch support, and a curious note, so that the feet may sing. You trace the lines with your finger. Someone long before you had the same idea. You add the sketch to the Book of Souls. Underneath you write, we're not the first to care, just the next. Historians often wonder how knowledge was passed in ancient trades. Oral tradition, secret codes, apprenticeship. You now believe it's something simpler. Footprints. Not literal ones, though those help, but the metaphorical kind, the mistakes, the small discoveries, the echoes. You hear them everywhere now, in the way Pebble hums while stitching, in the way Sandalstrap corrects a strap angle without thinking, in how Kibi mutters pressure here while tapping leather. Even Lefty, who once couldn't lace a sandal, now teaches others with calm precision. Your workshop is no longer just yours. It's become a path. One evening, you take off your sandals and walk barefoot down the Nile's edge. It's not a metaphor. You just want to feel the mud between your toes again. You return with an idea. Toeless sandals. Lefty gasps. Revolutionary. Callus faints. Pebble says, please don't make them real. You do anyway. They're awful, but hilarious. They go on the mistake wall. You name them. Nice try. By now, you hardly even notice when strangers enter your workshop. You're elbow deep in resin when a boy appears with a box. He says nothing, just hands it to you, and waits. You lift the lid. Inside, a single sandal, gold thread, pearl buttons, a sole so thin it's practically dream stuff. And a note, can you make the other one? You stare at the sandal. It's not one of yours. In fact, it's not like anything you've seen in Egypt. The stitching, foreign. The shape, oddly curled. The design suggests someone who valued elegance over function. Maybe royalty, maybe madness. You look at the boy, he shrugs. You look back at the sandal. Challenge accepted. It takes 3 days. You study the curves, the weave, the way the strap loops unnecessarily twice around the arch. The pearl buttons are mismatched, one even chipped. You copy it all. When the boy returns, you hand him the twin. He studies it carefully, nods, leaves. You never learn his name. But a week later, a letter arrives. No name again, just thanks. And a new challenge. Make a pair for someone who cannot walk. No details, just trust. You pause. Then begin. The sandals you make have padded soles, gentle sloping arches, and a looped design that hugs the foot like a kind whisper. You don't know whose feet they'll touch, but you imagine someone bedridden, someone who wants to remember what standing felt like. You name them Hope Pair. They're never picked up. You keep them on the shelf just in case. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian craftsmen took on commissions from other lands. Was there cross-border artistry or simply mimicry from trade? You have your answer now. Somewhere out there, someone is walking in a mirror of your creation, and someone else is still waiting to. You step back and survey your life's work, the wall of mistakes, the rows of well-worn tools, the faces of your apprentices, older now, confident. Even Sandal Strap has stopped rhyming everything, mostly. The shop is larger now, not because of wealth, just necessity. People come, people stay, people walk. One evening, Ninny says, we should open a second workshop. You arch an eyebrow. You want a franchise? She grins. No, just a sister space south of here where the river turns slow. You think about it, then say yes. The new workshop opens with little fanfare, just a painted sign that reads, Feet Welcome. You don't work there. Ninny does. She trains others, teaches them your methods, your philosophy, comfort, care, and the occasional ridiculous idea. Lefty insists on decorating the place with beetle motifs. You allow it. Begrudgingly. Pebble starts writing a treatise, The Philosophy of Souls. Callus invents a sandal that makes bird sounds when you walk. You confiscate it immediately. Still, you let it sit in the mistake wall, just in case. People begin to leave small tokens at the shop. Pebbles, feathers, miniature scrolls. One day, someone leaves a sandal carved out of soap. It melts by noon, but it smelled like jasmine. You write a new entry in the Book of Solis. Sometimes a gift isn't meant to last, only to be noticed. Late one night, a scholar visits. Gray robe, sunken eyes, scrolls peeking from every pocket. He studies the workshop, takes notes, mutters phrases like foot anthropology and theology of tread. He finally asks, do you believe sandals have souls? You reply, only the left ones. He laughs for a solid minute, then buys 3 pairs. Historians still debate whether Egyptian artisans saw their craft as sacred. Some argue it was all routine. Others suggest a quiet reverence, a belief that to shape something by hand was to leave a trace of the divine. You know, the truth is somewhere in between. You once spent 3 weeks making sandals for a nobleman's pet baboon. He threw them into the Nile. You were annoyed, then impressed. The baboon clearly had taste. Another time, you repaired a sandal that had belonged to someone's grandmother. It smelled of lavender and river clay. The owner wept when they slipped it on. You now believe that sandals aren't about walking. They're about remembering who walked before you, who carried you, who stepped aside so you could pass. One day, a little girl walks into your shop and says, "I want to be a keeper, too." You ask, "Of souls?" She shakes her head. "Of stories." You smile. They're the same thing. You give her a small sandal, blank, and a tiny hammer. She breaks the hammer immediately. You give her another. She swings it like a queen. There's a joy in watching others begin, a kind of peace that settles into your bones. You realize you don't need to make every sandal anymore, just enough to remember what it feels like. To bend, to shape, to listen. You go to bed that night with sore hands and a full heart. The moonlight stretches across your floor like a silver sandal strap. You close your eyes, thinking of souls past and steps yet taken. And you dream of feet, of stories, of sandals flying quietly through the stars. The morning begins quietly, not with hammering, not with bustle, but with the slow, measured sweep of a broom across the threshold. You're not the one sweeping, it's Pebbles. She's humming, methodical. Even the dust motes seem to move in rhythm. You sit back, sip a bit of tamarind tea, and marvel at how little your hands ache this morning. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's something else. There's a knock at the door. Not a hard one, soft, tentative. You open it to find a woman in traveling robes, dusty from the road, carrying something wrapped in a faded linen cloth. "I heard," she says, "that you make sandals worth walking home for." You laugh gently. "That depends on how far home is." She unwraps the cloth. Inside, a pair of sandals that might once have been beautiful, now brittle, cracked, held together by twine and memory. "These were my mother's," she says. "She walked to her wedding in them, to the market, to the river, and back. I just want to keep walking in her path, if you can help." You take the sandals in your hands. The leather flakes like old papyrus, but the shape still holds, the arch, the worn edges, the curve where her big toe once pressed. You nod. "We don't fix," you say. We remember. We carry forward." The woman sits. She stays all day, watches as you work. You show her each stitch, each careful fold. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, it's always about her mother. How she laughed when it rained, how she sang while kneading bread, how she once outran a camel on a dare. When the sandals are finished, they're not a copy of the old ones. They're an echo, a tribute. She slips them on. They fit. Before she leaves, she touches your shoulder. "Thank you," she whispers. You nod, but say nothing. Words aren't always necessary. Later, Callus reads aloud from his personal journal. You didn't know he kept one. Entry 71, he announces, "Today, a woman cried over a pair of sandals, not because they were broken, but because they were hers again." Everyone claps politely. Callus bows dramatically, trips over the bird call sandal, and falls flat on his face. You leave him there, dignity fully departed. That evening, Ninny returns from the sister workshop. She brings a new apprentice with her, barefoot, eager-eyed, clutching a half-stitched sole with glue on her nose. You let her sit by the Book of Souls. She opens it, reads silently, then writes, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to do it well." You smile. It's perfect. Historians still ponder the daily rituals of craftspeople in the ancient world. Did they have prayers before working, songs, silences? Now it was all of that. Not codified, not formal, just care, rhythm, connection. You still wake early most days, still sweep the dust, still stitch slowly. But now others pick up the pace. Others correct the stitches. Others lead the stories. You rest more, watch more, listen. One afternoon, a nobleman sends a letter. "I request 10 pairs of sandals, each dyed the color of falcon feathers." You write back, "Request denied. Try a scarf." Kibi laughs until tea comes out of her nose. The apprentices create a new sandal in your honor. It's completely impractical. 4 layers of soles, each stamped with your face. They name it the Founder. You display it prominently. Life, you realize, is made not just in footsteps, but in the things we leave for others to walk in. The sound of the Nile hums at the edge of your days. The wind still rustles through papyrus reeds, through open windows, over the tools arranged just so. Each breath of air brings memories. Of your first day stepping into this strange job, of sandal scraps and biting ants, of failure walls and beetle gods, of stories woven into leather, and always feet, wandering, returning, dancing, dragging, and sometimes just standing still, waiting. You breathe in. The leather smells like sunlight and ash. You breathe out. The past walks with you, and gently, night begins. And now the tools are put away, the lamps dim, the sandals rest on their shelves quietly, waiting for morning feet. The Nile slips softly outside your window, whispering to the reeds, the same way it has for thousands of years. You let that sound settle into your breath, slow, even, like ripples lapping against ancient stone. Somewhere in the distance, a frog sings, then another. The workshop creaks like an old friend stretching its limbs. The apprentices have gone to bed. Even Lefty has stopped narrating his dreams aloud. Finally, the sandals made today still carry a little heat, as if they've already walked a mile in someone else's story. And maybe, in a way, they have. You sit by the window, watch the moon glaze the river in silver. The breeze brushes your face like soft linen. You trace your thumb across a sandal strap, just to feel the curve of the work, the memory it already holds. Your eyes grow heavier. You let them. The workshop fades. The moon drifts higher. You're no longer awake, not quite asleep. Just somewhere in between. Floating in sandal-shaped thoughts, quiet streets, gentle footsteps. And as you drift, you remember the softest truth, that even the most ordinary work with enough love becomes something sacred. Sleep well, keeper. Your job is done for today.